Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know, from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars, topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
GSMC Basketball Podcast, right here on the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brice. We have a very news-filled day in terms of just updates on certain players around the league. Also, we'll talk about some things that have been happening around the league. Obviously, coming back from the All-Star break, everybody trying to make that final push for the playoffs. Obviously, this is probably one of the most exciting times for NBA fans because now they know the final push is coming and we're about to see who will separate themselves as the top 8 in each conference going forward into the playoffs in April. We're going to talk about, like I said, many different things, and obviously I'm going to give you my college basketball take today. Obviously, going to prepare you for the big games this weekend, what to look out for, what to watch, thoughts on some games, and we'll also talk about some upsets that actually happened earlier in the week as well. So we have all that and more coming up right now on the podcast. So here's the thing. If you think about this realistically, we're going to start with our first news story. Our first news story, Joel Embiid. If you watch the Cleveland game, Joel Embiid has sprained his left shoulder. He was injured in the end of the first quarter. And obviously, if you're a Philadelphia 76er fan, this is very sad news. And you're kind of worried right now because two of your best players who you were trying to see is this going to be the last season together for them are both now hurt and don't know how long they're going to be out. Embiid has already been ruled out to play against the Knicks, and we don't know how long he'll be out. Simmons is going to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, and we don't know how long he'll be out. Obviously, you hope you can get them out before they get to, the actual playoffs. I mean, like I said, you're hoping that they'll be able to get out there and compete and play. Like I said, it's a little worrisome, a little concerning, but you hope for the best. And I think personally, in my personal opinion, this obviously is going to maybe dampen their seeding in the playoffs because obviously your two best players aren't playing. So you may be able to make that argument, okay, so the 76ers might slide a little bit now because their two best players aren't playing. Obviously you don't want that, but that's kind of how it is. So we'll have to see what happens when it comes to that. We'll have to see what happens when it comes to Tobias Harris. Obviously Tobias Harris is now going to be the main guy. The 76ers can still be afloat if Tobias Harris continues to have big games, but we don't know what's going to happen with that. We hope for the best, but we'll have to see. I think it's going to be very important to actually go out there and just compete if you're a 76er player and just try to hold the fort until one of them gets back. It just feels like everything's going wrong for the 76ers this year also. It feels like a lot of things are going downhill. Kind of makes you wonder, is it just meant not to be with them? Because it just feels like every worst thing that's happening, all the drama, all the media attention, all the criticism, and then you're having your two best players go down. It just feels like it's just not going to be the 76ers year in any regard. It's a little disappointing, and obviously you hope that they can recover from it and do better, but, it's just one of those things that you see and you're worried about. Hopefully Embiid's not out too long. Hopefully this may, knowing with shoulder sprains, these also can linger because you don't want to come rushing back too soon and then he re-injures his shoulder. But at the same time, you don't want to push him too far forward and then he injures his, his shoulder again. And then next thing you know, he's out even longer, can maybe become torn. It's one of those things with both of the injuries that both Simmons and Embiid have. You have to be careful about the way you nurse them, back to health and how soon you get them back out there on the field. So like I said, you don't want to rush it. You don't want to rush it. If you rush it, that could end up being a very bad thing. So definitely do not want to do that. If you're Brett Brown and the 76ers brass, you don't want to rush your two best players out there. If you could get them back in there before the end of this regular season, I think that would be good, because it at least gives you the opportunity to, be able to make sure that your guys get some playing time, get some minutes before the playoffs start. Try to get the rhythm and their conditioning back underneath them in game shape, but also at the same time, get prepared to have that team going into the playoffs. So that's kind of like the big thing there. In other news, Kelly Oubre, one of the young rising up and coming players in the league, has had his best season this year with the Phoenix Suns. Is now probably out for the rest of the season with a torn meniscus. Obviously, this is a big loss for the Suns, and it's a sad ending to a season for a player who's had one of his best seasons since he's been in the NBA. Originally drafted by the Wizards, number 3 overall, didn't pan out to the extent that they wanted. That's why he was traded to the Suns, but has had his best season under these guys, and obviously, you hate to see it, but it's one of those things where you hope for the best, and you hope that he can get back from and have a speedy recovery and be healthy next year. He's a guy, definitely, I feel like the Suns feel like they've got a gem in Kelly Oubre, and it's one of the reasons why they've been as competitive as they have been in previous years. Well, in this year. Currently this year. It's why they've been very competitive, why they've been as competitive going forward. Also, Malik Monk. He's been suspended by the league for violating their wellness policy, I believe. Obviously, Malik Monk hasn't had the career that we may have thought he would have, but he has been a rotation player in Charlotte. And obviously, this is a big suspension. Obviously, you don't want these guys getting hurt like this or getting suspended. Obviously, you want them to be able to be healthy and play at all times. Obviously, they brought a statement out saying, we don't like the fact that this happened, but we will support him, as every team says. Hopefully, like I said, he can get back on track, though, and get back on a good stage and a good point in his life. And, obviously, they also said something interesting about it won't start till he's compliant. So I guess that means that he's kind of been resisting the suspension. I mean, not necessarily in terms of him playing. Maybe he's just not. I don't know if you have to go through acceptance or something. I guess he hasn't accepted it yet. So, I think, suspending people definitely is like the new thing. Because, like, you can just decide, okay, let's bring him back now or let him go later. So that's kind of how that's going. Also, big game last night from everybody that is competing for the 8th playoff spot. Big games, obviously Magic trying to hang on to that 8th spot. Brooklyn still trying to get in the race, even without Kyrie. Washington still has an outside chance. All those teams have a chance. We'll talk about that later in the show, but I just wanted to mention that now because obviously that's a big thing for everybody to make sure everybody comes out there and plays at the highest level. You don't want anything bad happening, potentially. But lastly, J.R. Smith is still available, and J.R. Smith made a statement recently saying that he is better than 85% of the people who are playing currently in the league right now are on rosters. Kind of like a Carmelo thing where Carmelo was like, well, I'm better than most people who's on the roster right now. Well, J.R. Smith feels the same way. He feels like he should have a job. Obviously, J.R. has been in talks with the Lakers, even though it looks like they're leaning more towards Dion Waiters right now, and he's wondering why he hasn't had maybe more interest. Obviously, J.R. Smith has been known as one of the premier 3-and-D guys, a guy who can shoot the 3 ball, play some defense, a guy that, obviously has championship experience, obviously winning one with Cleveland, been on many teams in his career. What they call him, J.R. Swish, because, when J.R. Smith gets hot, he can get as hot as the best of them. And so I think that's why there's that question if any team's going to take a flyer and try to pick him up for the incoming season or the end of the season going into the playoffs. Like I said, there hasn't seemed like there's been a lot of interest around him, but we don't know if that's going to continue to be the case. We obviously hope that J.R. Swish is able to get back in the league potentially. Like I said, he's been one of the better players in the league for a second now, and he's done what he's needed to do out there to be competitive at all times. And he's probably working out, staying ready, just in case he ever gets that call, as all players would in that situation. Because you never know when a team's going to say, "Hey, we'll bring you in for a workout. Come in." So, but coming up next, has the Rockets' small ball unleashed another weapon in Russell Westbrook? Bradley Beal says he was drug tested after 2 back-to-back 50-point games, and the Jazz benched Joe Ingles. But there's more to the story. Right here, all that more next.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about Kelly Oubre being out with a torn meniscus, Malik Monk being suspended indefinitely, Embiid being out for a while with a shoulder sprain. Obviously, that's a big deal because Ben Simmons is down, now Embiid is down, and the 76ers' 2 best players are down, and we don't know what this means for the 76ers moving forward. Hopefully, like I said, they're not out too long or they won't miss any playoff time because obviously we feel like, the 76ers won't have a chance if one of them's not playing, in my opinion. But we don't know. It also depends on matchups, because obviously if they get a favorable matchup, potentially. But I feel like there is something here where it's like there is some concern that they won't be able to do anything this year, and then you'll see the implosion of the 76ers this offseason. And last, we also talked about J.R. Smith, who's still looking for a job, who still thinks he can play in this league at a high level, and still wants to compete at the highest level. Probably looking to get on with the team going into the playoffs, clearly. Hopefully, we'll see if anybody takes the flyer on J.R. Smith, J.R. Swish. But now, we're going to get into a little discussion topic right now. So, basically, obviously, if you've noticed and you've watched the Rockets over the past month, Russell Westbrook has probably played some of his best basketball since the Clint Capella trade. One of the reasons for that is because, obviously, if you know Russ's game and you know how Russ plays, he is a guy who is exceptional going to the rim. He's one of the fastest players in the league, and he's one of the better finishers in the league. Now, obviously, with him, since his strength is slashing instead of shooting, you want to make sure he has space to operate. With the Clint Capella trade, that gave them a small ball lineup, which everybody obviously has been questioning and wondering about because they don't know, can that really work against teams who have legitimate big men that can score? But one of the advantages is this. Since nobody's in the paint now, Russell, obviously being one of the best players at getting into the paint and finishing, has now taken advantage of this and now has had easier shots and has made a lot of plays. That's why he's almost averaging 20-30 a game now since this trade. And you can say it almost unleashed a secret weapon because obviously earlier this year, with Clint Capella in the game, obviously he hasn't been able to get into the paint because Clint's occupying it, so he's having to pull up for jumpers, and obviously that's not his game. And even though he takes a lot of them, we know that's not his strength. Where now Clint, because it's not there, he can now drive to the paint, be efficient, go to the paint, and just do what he has to do to be successful. And obviously that contributes to a lot of his successes moving forward. And so this really could be very interesting. The one thing about this small ball offense for the Houston Rockets is this. They're going to be able to get good shots because they're going to have so much spacing and so much movement. There's going to be open shots. It's just, can they hit them? it's one of those things. If Houston hits their shots, they can beat any team in the league. But if they miss their shots, then you're not really great on the defensive end when it comes to if the team you're playing has an elite big man like a Lakers and Anthony Davis. So for them, they have to make shots. Basically, they're kind of in this position of we have to outscore everybody. Because that's going to be the most important thing. You got to make sure you outscore everybody. And that can sometimes be very tough to do. So I think it's definitely important for them to come out here and play at a high level. And be able to outscore every team they play. And just do the best they can. I do feel like the additions of Amari Carroll and Jeff Green were actually very key buyout additions. Jeff Green is probably your best, most pure big man you have because he's been labeled a power forward most of his career, who's just versatile and can guard threes and twos. But with those guys like him and Damari, I think that's going to add obviously more spacing, obviously because everybody can shoot a three, and potentially create situations for Russell where now you can't double team because Russ has shown he's able to get the ball out to people and make plays. So you kind of have to almost in a way just go one-on-one Russell and hope that whoever you got on Russell can guard him. Now, once you figure out what type of offense they run and everybody stands around, it's a little bit easier because you can collapse and you just got to make sure you can get back on time. But this offensive game plan that the Houston Rockets now have with Russell can now potentially be one of the most dangerous offenses they have. And this is not even including James Harden. If James Harden goes off, James Harden doesn't need space. He can create his own. See, Russell, if you give him that ability to get to the paint, that could really definitely contribute to his success. Because if they're going to make success in the playoffs and give the LA teams a run for their money, they're going to need Russell and James Harden to probably average at least 55 to 60 between them, in my personal opinion, to have a chance. Because you got to have your best players play their best in the playoffs, and this would be the situation where they would have to prove to everybody then and there that they're one of the best teams in the playoffs. So that's obviously going to be their goal, is to make sure everybody's on the same page and everybody plays at a high level. Because you never want a point where someone struggles, someone's not doing good enough. And we'll have to see if this small ball can actually have the success that the Houston Rockets want to have. And we'll see how far they make it in the playoffs because of it at the same time. Another story coming out, Bradley Beal, after beating Brooklyn yesterday, came out and talked about how the NBA sent him a drug test after scoring two 50-point back-to-back games. Obviously, we know it's kind of funny. There's a history of the NBA when a player either looks maybe buffer than what we think or has these historic performances. Sometimes the NBA likes to send random drug tests to these people. And obviously players are feeling like, well, it's because I did something that maybe they wouldn't think I could do. So they'll be like, oh, wait, he did that? Isn't he not supposed to do that? Maybe we should drug test and make sure there's no stuff in it that's helping him be able to do it. So obviously that's going to be a very crucial situation. It's just funny, hearing something like that, hearing that the NBA does that because, Bradley Beal's always had the scoring potential. So I don't know why they would feel they didn't drug test him. But maybe they just feel like 50 back-to-back nights. I don't know. That's a little suspect to me. That's a little suspect. But I guess it is what it can be, or it is what it is. So that's the funny story right there. Lastly, the Utah Jazz. So they benched Joe Ingles. They took him out of the starting lineup. But one of the crazy things is, earlier in the day, The Athletic reported that the Jazz were going to actually bench Mike Conley. And they had informed the team that they were going to bench Mike Conley. But then a couple hours later, They came back, and then they went ahead and benched Joe Ingles instead. So obviously this was a bit of a confusement because it's like, wait, I thought you were going to bench him. Why are you benching? Like, what changed? Why did you make this decision? It was just a very awkward little process before the game they had to play that night against Boston, and just not having this, I guess, uncertainty of who you're going to actually end up playing, obviously makes people a little nervous, because it's like, wait, so is he playing or is he playing? I think that would be the question. So, I just think it's interesting that, Utah kind of had that miscommunication with the team. And you're asking, how do you have that type of miscommunication? How do you not know who you're going to play and who you're not going to play? Stuff like that, basically. It's confusing to a lot of people, but, I mean, it's a part of it. In my personal opinion, it's a part of it. And, obviously Utah has been struggling recently, which is why they made any changes in the first place. They're probably trying to find a spark or find a lineup that works for them. So, obviously in the first game back since that lineup changed against the Boston Celtics, they lost. So that didn't particularly help in terms of winning. But at the same time, I mean, it's only one game. We'll have to see what happens in the next couple of games at Utah. We'll have to see what happens going into the future with Utah and go on from there. But coming up next, the Clippers are interested in keeping Marcus Morris and Montrezl Harrell after the season. The Pacers had interest in Aaron Gordon at the trade deadline. The Heat are interested in DeMarcus Cousins if he doesn't re-sign. And other news and notes around the NBA right here on the podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about if the Rockets' small ball has unleashed another weapon in Russell Westbrook, how it's affected Russell Westbrook's play, why he's played better, scored more points, and can maximize Russell Westbrook to the best of his potential. Bradley Beal was drug tested after 2 back-to-back 50-point games. A little funny story to slide in there, because the NBA likes to do this sometimes after big performances or something, I guess they feel like is unnatural happens. Obviously, it's a very exciting, it's actually a very funny thing, like I said, to see. And also the Jazz benching Joe Ingles, but having miscommunication earlier in the day by saying it was actually supposed to be Mike Conley, but then telling the team it was Mike Conley, then later coming back and saying, no, we're going to bench Joe Ingles instead. So obviously that created some confusion among, a lot of people. But so now we're going to get into some more news and notes around the league. Clippers interested in keeping Marcus Morris and Montrezl Harrell after this season. Obviously, they traded for Marcus Morris this season from the Knicks to bolster their bench and to bolster their front line and add versatility defensively to their lineup. Obviously, Montrezl has been there and has developed into one of the best players off the bench and one of the premier big men in the league. So obviously it would make sense they want to keep both because they know how important both would be to their future success and potential championship success moving forward. So if they're able to lock these two guys up, that obviously would be very effective and it will help them in the future when it comes to winning. I feel like it creates a atmosphere of we're dedicated to winning and we want to keep our best players so we can win. So obviously that's going to be something that they're going to try to do and make happen. As like I said, they should. There's too much potential and talent here to not do it. And They're just coming out there every day just trying to compete, work hard, which you would always expect. It's one of those things I think that you just look at on paper and you just hope for the best. You hope for the best and you hope for success if they can get these two back on the Clippers going into future years to come. Because like I said, they know how important it is to have them both a part of the team. Obviously, Marcus Morris having one of his best seasons since being on the Knicks, having his best statistical season. You can maybe make the argument he was the best player on the Knicks, which obviously made him a very valuable trade asset. Montrezl Harrell, he obviously has been there for a few years, developed his game. Undersized, but can score. And he's a bulldog in the paint. Kind of a tough player. Shows a toughness. And that's what you like about a guy like a Montrezl Harrell or Marcus Morris. It's very, very interesting and very, very needed, I think, for both guys to come out there and compete at a high level, because they both have all the potential in the world to be one of the better, or if not one of the best at their current positions in terms of a championship team and helping them reach their success and their goals that they have and they have created for themselves. So, also, the Pacers had interest in trading for Aaron Gordon around the trade deadline. Aaron Gordon currently is with the Orlando Magic. Been there since he was drafted by Orlando and has been there since. He is one of the best dunkers and one of the more athletic players in the NBA. But obviously, since being in Orlando, he's never really found much winning success. But he's a nice player to have on your team. He's developed a three-point shot. Like I said, he's very athletic, so alley hoops and everything is his specialty. He's just done what he needs to do out there to play at a high level. It's funny because you don't hear much about Aaron Gordon wanting to be moved, but I'm sure Orlando will look into it maybe this offseason. I wouldn't be surprised if the Pacers try to look back into it again this offseason, because you want to kick the tires on things that you don't have a definitive answer about, or a definitive awareness of in the long term. Aaron Gordon, I think, could really help a lot of teams. I'm surprised, honestly, he's not as wanted by teams as I would think. I just think he could give you that guy that you want. He's basically a more athletic Montrezl Harrell. Gordon can get you 15 to 20 a game. And he may not be the greatest defender necessarily, but he'll give you effort on the defensive end. He's also one of the better players in the league, just like I said, in terms of getting the alley. So pick and roll game could be great with Aaron Gordon. Pick and roll game could be, as they say sometimes, deadly, because of how good he has become, how he's developed this game. Because remember, coming out of college, his athleticism was the only thing he really had. Now he's developed more skills and incorporated into his NBA game. That shows the growth of a player. It shows growth, and that's what you always want to show is growth. You want to show that you have gotten better and you've improved every chance you could get. And so with that being known, obviously that helps in terms of, like I said, long-term success. Because that long-term success is what you want for any player in the NBA. So if Indiana had got them and acquired them onto the team, I'm sure that would have boosted their team, especially with Victor Oladipo coming back. Again, nobody would probably think championship or anything like that, but I mean, depending on what they give up, him, Sabonis, that's a pretty good front line. You got Oladipo at the back end with Brogdon. I mean, they got solid players. Indiana is a very well-built team. They have a very well-built organization. So, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to be successful. Because they have all the talent in the world to be a very successful team. A very, very successful team. And lastly, before we go to break, we have news that if the Heat, if they want DeMarcus Cousins, and he doesn't sign with the Lakers, they will definitely make a push for him. DeMarcus Cousins is obviously hurt right now, coming back from a torn ACL, was waived by the Lakers recently. But that was more because of the success that they've had and he's had. Miami, obviously, I think knows they could use a guy who could score down low. And with that being known, I mean, it would only booster them. It would only booster their team, boost their roster, boost everything. And would put them in, like I said, a better position in the future. So maybe next year, depending on how they do this year, next year come back and be one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference again. And maybe make even a deeper run in the playoffs. Because obviously we know at the end of the day, championship is the goal for every team. You want the chip. You want the championship. If you don't, then why are you playing this game? So obviously we'll see if DeMarcus Cousins doesn't sign with LA, because he could still resign. Some people think he'll resign maybe by the playoffs. Some people think he may resign after the season. So we will have to see potentially. We'll have to see potentially what decisions are made when it comes to DeMarcus Cousins' future. But coming up next, Terry Scott isn't on the hot seat, even though the Portland Trailblazers have been kind of waning a little bit with injuries. In the race, I'll also talk about the race for the 8th spot in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference. All that here and more right here on the podcast.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we obviously talked about some news and notes around the league. Obviously, I talked about the Clippers wanting to keep Marcus Morris and Montrezl Harrell on the team after another year, after this year actually, because obviously they feel like they're going to be very important for them to make a playoff run into the future. Pacers had interest in Aaron Gordon at the trade deadline. That would have been an interesting fit. I discussed my thoughts on that, and I'm surprised that more teams don't try to go after Aaron Gordon, because I feel like he could definitely help a lot of teams. One of the most athletic players we have in this league, as you can tell from the dunk contest. Obviously, from in-game stuff, I think he could. And he's also developed his game over the years since he came into the league. And lastly, the Heat are interested in DeMarcus Cousins. If he doesn't re-sign with the LA Lakers, obviously the Heat are doing this for future reference. DeMarcus Cousins, he may never be the DeMarcus Cousins, or it looks like at this point he'll never be DeMarcus Cousins he was in Sacramento. But if he's even halfway of that, I think he could still help a team, and obviously the Heat see that, and they see his value, and they would love to bring him into the organization and help out Jimmy Butler and those guys to potentially try to win a championship. Now we're going to get into some playoff talk here. Since we're getting close to the end of the season, we're going to get into some more playoff talks. First story, though, is Terry Scott's. Obviously, if you've been paying attention to Portland's season, Portland has been, obviously dealing with a lot of injuries this year. A lot of guys have been out. A lot of different things have happened. It's one of those things where, it's affected the performance of the team. CJ's been in and out of the lineup. Just recently, Damian Lillard was hurt, and he's been out for the last few games. And so really, thinking about it and understanding the situation, if you think about it realistically, a lot of things are happening right now. And some people were wondering, would they potentially fire Terry Stotts if they don't make the playoffs and have a losing record? But all indications are that his job will be safe, regardless of how the season ends, because I think a good organization sees we've made it to the playoffs the last few years. We made it to the Western Conference Finals last year. This year we've had a bunch of injuries. Obviously, Nurkic has not played at all this year. Zach Collins has missed a lot of time. And like I said, you've had injuries here and there, a lot of new pieces, so chemistry, a lot of different things are what's keeping Portland from really reaching maybe what we think they should be at this point. And obviously, you don't want to make any rash decisions, in my opinion. So, I think it'd be a good move on their part to not go ahead and make anything or make any too quick of a decision. And I think it'd be smart for them to do that because I think they have all the potential in the world to be, one of the best teams in the league. Because they have the backcourt, they have depth, they have a lot of other guys. They just have never been healthy this whole year. And they've never really been able to put it together. And obviously, when you have that can contribute to a lot of the struggles that have been going on right now, and why it's difficult to truly hit where you want to be as a team, because with injuries and everything, it hurts you in the long term. But now, talking about Portland, we're going to talk about both 8th spots in both conferences. We're going to talk about how everybody's trying to, jockey for that 8th spot. Obviously, that's always the most heated race at the end of the year. They always like to call it the Losers Invitational, because literally you're going to get the 8th spot and have to go against the number 1 seed, which more likely than not you will probably lose to most of the time. And we're going to start in the Western Conference right now. Obviously, right now, the 8th seed is the Memphis Grizzlies. At 28-30, they've lost 4 in a row, though. Memphis is playing the toughest schedule at the end of the year. And they have not looked very good. Coming off 2 blowout losses to 2 elite teams in the Western Conference. It just looks like Memphis is not ready to compete against higher off competition. And, they have young talent and they have plenty of potential, but it's just not looking good right now. And I feel like with the schedule they're having the end of the year, I think they're not going to end up making the playoffs, because I just think it's too much, and I just think they're not ready yet. Now, obviously, 9th in the spot and about a game and a half behind is the Portland Trailblazers at 26-23. So Portland right now is still in the driver's seat to make the playoffs right now. If Damian Lillard can get back soon, that's definitely going to help. And maybe that's when the Blazers can really make the run here in the last month of the year coming up. And they could really, then make that jump into the 8th spot. And, obviously there'll be a tough out because, if CJ is healthy and Damian's healthy and they get Nurkic back and, everybody's healthy, Whiteside, I mean, we haven't seen this team at full strength. So we don't know how good they truly are. Now, we would expect the Lakers to still beat them, but, that could be a very interesting series if everybody can get back and get healthy. The Pelicans are number 10. They're only 3 games out of the 8th spot. Obviously, this is the popular pick. People want the Pelicans to make it because of Zion, because of the Zion-LeBron matchup potentially in the first round. Also because they feel like the Rookie of the Year is on the line too, where if Zion is able to get his team into the playoffs only playing half of the season, that will definitely help. It will definitely help promote, winning the Rookie of the Year for Zion. So I'm sure that that's something they're definitely going to try to do. Obviously, they're very, very close. The Kings are right behind them at 3.5 games. Obviously, we've talked about the issues the Kings have had. If they somehow make the playoffs, that's definitely going to help. But I'm sure that it's something that a lot of people kind of wonder about. Can they pull it off? Are they going to be able to do it? Like I said, there's a lot of talent here. There's a lot of talent potentially here, and we're gonna have to see what happens. Obviously, and the Spurs are also in there with 3.5 games. Obviously, the Spurs are a team that you never want to rule out, but you just don't think they have the guns this year. If your two best players are DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, it's just not going to win you a lot of games to the playoffs unless the Western Conference was just really bad. I just don't think they have much of a chance in this situation. I just don't think they have the horses to get them over the top to get to that point. And then lastly, the last team who's currently still in the race at 4.5 games, the Phoenix Suns. Obviously, losing Kelly Oubre is a big loss. That probably might seal it for them. They were a long stretch anyway, but that potentially could be the game sealer right there for them going long term into the playoffs and trying to make the 8th spot in the Western Conference. Now we're going to get to the Eastern Conference. We're going to talk about that 8th spot. Right now, the Magic are currently in the 8th spot right now. They are currently only a half game behind the Nets for the 7th spot. So they're both could be jockeying for the 8th spot. One loss here, one Orlando win here, they get to number 7. Right behind the Magic, in a 4.5 game deficit, is the Wizards, who a lot of people consider the only team realistically who might be able to make the playoffs. Obviously, Bradley Beal out here having historic performances, playing his hardest to make sure that they have a chance. Obviously, the Wizards were not expected to be that great this year anyway without John Wall. So, obviously, this is kind of what you expect from records and everything like that. Now, obviously, what also comes into this situation is, and what makes this very interesting, is that obviously we'll have to see what happens with the Wizards next year when John Wall gets back. And then, obviously, the Hornets and Bulls, they're about 6 and 6.5 games out. Very unlikely, again, that they're going to get into the playoffs. The Eastern Conference isn't as competitive at that point. Because, really, if you look at the top 8, since there's at least a 4.5 game deficit between the next guy, all Orlando has to do is not go on a bad losing streak, and the Wizards go on like a 5-6 game winning streak, and they'll probably make the playoffs, and Brooklyn will probably make the playoffs too. So all these teams got to do is just make sure they don't go into a long of a losing streak, and they'll be fine. So, that's pretty much your 8th spot picture right now. If you're wondering who's number 1 in tanking right now, obviously it's the Warriors. 2nd is Atlanta. 3 is Cleveland. 4 is the Knicks. And 5 is Minnesota. Those are the 5 top worst records in the league in terms of tanking. So these are probably going to be the teams in the mix for that first overall draft pick this year. Obviously, I already reported what the Golden State would do if they were to get that pick. And we don't know what other teams would do if they get that pick. But obviously those teams are maybe going to try to get top pick in this year's draft and try to improve their team going into next year. But coming up next, we're going to go into some college basketball talk. You know what I do. There were some upsets this week in college basketball. I'll talk to you about that. Also, I'll get you prepared for the big games coming up this weekend. All that and more right here on the podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we talked about Terry Stotts isn't on the hot seat right now. People wondered if he would potentially be fired if the Portland Trailblazers don't make the playoffs. From all indications, he is probably safe and good to go. Also, the race for the 8th Eastern Conference and Western Conference 8th spot. I talked about all the teams who still have a relative chance to get it, who's in the picture, who's not. Also, I also gave an update on the teams who have the worst records in the league, so obviously that's your take category. And those are the people that you are expecting to lose at the end of the day. Or they're battling for the number 1 overall draft pick, so to say, to get, a top 3 pick, really. So there's that. But now, I'm going to talk to you about college basketball. I'm going to talk to you about what happened earlier this week, some of the games, the big games and upsets that happened. And I'm also going to get you ready for this week and the big games that you need to look out for. So obviously Monday night, Texas upset West Virginia 67-57 in a big game. Obviously Texas still trying to make a little push towards the playoffs. This is obviously a big quality win for them. Beating a team like West Virginia. West Virginia's kind of fallen off a little bit, losing a couple of games in a row. Hopefully they can bounce back, but a big win for Texas when it comes to the resume builder, because eventually, in about 2 Sundays, I believe, or a Sunday, I believe, we're about to have Selection Sunday, so that's obviously a huge win at this point in the season. A big game also happened on Monday, Florida State and Louisville. Florida State, one of the best teams that nobody talks about in the ACC, defeated Louisville 82-67. Obviously, this was at Florida State, big win for Florida State. They're currently now the number 1 team in the ACC right now. So they could potentially get in there for a number 1 seed and a number 1 spot in the NCAA tournament, potentially, if they continue to win out. Another upset also happened on Tuesday. Oklahoma defeated number 22 Texas Tech 65-51. Obviously another big game, a good victory. The Sooners trying to get to the playoff. Into the tournament, being another quality Big 12 team that helps their resume out. Again, like I said, late in the season, these are always big victories to win games like this, because you need those types of games to help your resume and just, make sure you solidify yourself at least as an at-large bid or potentially a last 4 in. Big upset out of the ACC as the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest defeated Duke 113-101 in 2 overtimes. This is huge. In the second overtime, Wake Forest completely dominated Duke, winning the overtime 16-4. And basically, this was just a huge win for them. Crucial game. Probably solidifies them not getting a number 1 spot. Still could get a number 2 potentially, but they might drop down to a 3 after this loss. Obviously, Duke in the last 3 games has lost 2 games, both to unranked ACC teams. So obviously those are going to be looked at as bad losses potentially. I mean, we don't know how people feel about the Demon Deacons in terms of the committee, but obviously they haven't been known as the best team. They've lost a lot of games this year. And this is just, like I said, a big loss for them. Obviously, you don't want to lose these types of games moving forward, going into the future. And also, last upset, Michigan State beats Iowa 70. The number 24 Michigan State Spartans beat number 18 Iowa Hawkeyes. So, obviously, both teams pretty much going to be in the tournament, but, just solidify, all I like to say is almost like a make sure. Just okay, we did what we had to do. We did what we needed to do. And now we're going to move forward into the future. So now, I'm going to tell you about some of the big games coming up this week. What games you should tune into and look out for. Obviously, big win in the Big Ten. Number 18 Iowa versus number 16 Penn State. Obviously, a big matchup in the Big Ten. Both teams coming out here competing high. Obviously, Penn State 21-7 on the year. Iowa 19-9. Penn State's had a very good last 10 game stretch, 8-2 coming into that game, 6-4 on the road. Iowa's been 15-1 at home, so this is going to be a home game for Iowa. They've been 6-4 their last 10, but this is where they thrive at home, so it's going to be a tough matchup for Penn State to come in here to Iowa City and be able to defeat the Iowa Hawkeyes, who's number 26 in the nation in scoring and 6th in assists. They're one of the best offensive teams in the country. And the home crowd's going to be rocking. Another big game, obviously, is Texas versus Texas Tech, because obviously that's big in terms of tournament seeding. Potentially, Texas again needing this win to improve. If they can win this game after beating West Virginia, this will only just solidify them getting into the tournament. So obviously, winning a game against a team like Texas Tech will only help them. Texas Tech needs this game just to also help with their resume. If losing this game will probably take them out of the AP 25, so obviously they're trying to stay in. Big game also, Kansas. Kansas versus Kansas State. Not big in terms of because it's a big game, obviously, unless an upset happens. But just remember the last time these two teams met, the big brawl that happened at the end of the game, which led to a lot of suspensions. All those players are now back. And obviously, this is the first time since that game they played. So it'll be interesting just to see at Kansas State what's going to happen. I'm sure Kansas State's going to be fired up and remember that and want to try to get revenge and try to upset Kansas, the number one team in the country. And be successful. Even though their season may be over, they want to try to maybe mess up Kansas's season a little bit themselves. Seton Hall versus Marquette. Big game. Both teams playing well. Seton Hall 7-3 in their last 10. Two game winning streak. Marquette 6-4. Marquette's one of those teams that's pretty good. The 33rd in the country at scoring. They can play hard. They play well. And they're just one of those teams that are going to come out there and compete every game. And nobody's going to have it easy. No one's going to have it easy against Marquette, especially at home. They're 15-3 at home, Marquette is, but Seton Hall's been a good road team all year, only losing 3 games on the road, 9-3 on the road. So it'll be interesting what happens to that game. Auburn and Kentucky play again, this time at Kentucky. Last time these two teams met, Auburn was able to beat Kentucky at Auburn. Now they're coming into this game where Auburn has lost all of their games this year on the road. So they're very vulnerable on the road. Kentucky's coming in as one of the hottest teams in the country, 16-1, 7-game winning streak, 9-1 in the last 10. So I feel like this would probably be a game where you expect Kentucky to get their win back, and it'll be 1-1 going into the SEC championship tournament and SEC tournament potentially. Because you feel like, okay, well, unless Auburn comes out and has one of the best games, you would think that they would be able to win. Kentucky. Other big games, obviously Duke and Virginia. Virginia's 20-7 on the year. Duke's 23-5. West Virginia's kind of catching their stride recently, winning 5 straight, 8-2 in their last 10. They're not the best offensive team, but they're one of the better defensive teams in the country. And after the way Duke's been playing this last couple of days, they could potentially be on another upset alert at Virginia, as Virginia is not a team to be slept on. They can play extremely well and play at a high level. Then Maryland and Michigan State go at it, 8 o'clock on ESPN. Maryland has been a team that has played extremely well. They're 9-1 their last 10. They're 15-0 at home, undefeated. So obviously this is going to be at Maryland, so that's going to be an uphill challenge for Michigan State, who are 7-5 on the road. If they can pull off the victory, that's going to be fantastic for them. We're going to have to see if they can, because obviously they need that win to help them moving forward, going into the future. And then last big game, Gonzaga and St. Mary's going at it. Obviously, this was the other team that usually gives Gonzaga problems outside of BYU. BYU upset Gonzaga last week. Now St. Mary's has their chance to upset them. Obviously, if St. Mary's wins this game, this is going to help them in terms of maybe potentially getting into the NCAA tournament. And another loss for Gonzaga might not be the greatest for them going forward, going into future big stakes. And then we're going to Sunday, big game, Michigan, Ohio State. Obviously, a rivalry. You know about the rivalry. Obviously, it's bigger in football, but basketball is still a great game. Two teams that are ranked 19 and 23, respectively, their rankings. Both 18-9 on the season. Michigan 7-3 in the last 10. Ohio State 6-4 in the last 10. Michigan's on a 5-game winning streak right now, playing some of their best basketball. Obviously, looking for a key and crucial win against the Ohio State Buckeyes going into the tournament. But coming up next, for our last segment of the show, I'm going to talk about some of the best players under 21 and who would I take if I wanted to start a team with the best players that are under 21 currently that is playing in the league, as the league is in very good hands with a lot of these players that I'm about to mention to you. All that and more right here on the podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Like I said, I obviously broke down the college games and the upsets and big games that happened so far this week. And I also talked about some of the big games happening this weekend. As I said, we're getting another week closer to Selection Sunday, which is obviously one of the biggest times in college basketball if you're a college basketball fan. Seeing the field of 64, and then after that, making obviously bracket madness, I like to call it. As everybody fills out a bracket, tries to win prizes, even though nobody ever gets a perfect bracket. Everybody tries, though, and that's what counts. Everybody tries. So, obviously, that's a very exciting time, as I've said before, in college basketball. But now we're going to get into a discussion that has been brought up a little bit around the league. Obviously, as you've seen, there's a lot of talented players below 21 in the league. From Trae Young to Luka Doncic to Jason Tatum, John Morant, Zion Williamson. A lot of guys below 21 who have came out and have seemed to be some of the best players in the league. And makes you think the league is in very good hands for the next decade to come. So, I think that's very impressive. So, I'm going to discuss with you guys that I like. I'm going to discuss with you who I would take at the end to start a team with. But I'm going to break down most of the players and tell you why you could start a team with them. The first person I'm going to start with is Luka Doncic. Obviously, if you watch Luka Doncic, he is one of the best scoring guards we have in this game. This man is an offensive magician. One of the reasons for that is because we all know about his upbringing. He played with grown men at 15. And obviously, Euro game, you develop your skills. They focus more on your fundamentals. So he had a lot of that in him, too. But he's also played against better competition at a younger age, which helped him get used to that competition and surpass that competition because of his potential. And so that helped him, move forward in terms of success in the future. And, I think with that being known, I think that's something that you definitely like to see moving forward and definitely makes you feel better about everything that is happening. Luka is a liability defensively, but he is a bigger guy. So it's not like he doesn't have the ability to become a good defender. It's just like a lot of young players, especially offensively talented young players, defense is not really a priority to them at first. They have to kind of get the habits down of becoming a defender. And he really has the ability to become one. Because like I said, he's a bigger guy. So it's not like Trae where he's small and can't defend. Or he can try it and just not be able to do it. He's bigger. It's just he doesn't always try. Which is obviously the knock on Luka when it comes to his game. Speaking of Trae, obviously the next guy, Trae Young. Trae Young, again, averaging 30 and 9 a game. One of the best scorers in the league. But he does it with his shooting. He is one of the best shooters that this league's ever seen. That's why a lot of people compared him to Steph Curry coming out. He can shoot literally right after the half-court line, and he's within range. And so, with that being said, Trae is on a daily basis coming out here giving you 30 a night. A liability defensively as well, but obviously his is more because of size and body and height issues, limitations that he can't overcome. He can try on defense, but he's not going to be a great defender. Now, one thing he can maybe be good at is getting some steals with his quickness and just making smart defensive IQ decisions. But in terms of just straight on ball or off ball defense, that's not really going to be something he's going to be good with. So you're always going to have players around him who can pick up for that. Because if you don't, that's where the issue sometimes can come. You definitely want to make sure though that you pick up on it and hopefully you hope Trey improves in all elements of the game. Obviously, he's been one of the players who hasn't had that much winning success, but obviously he's improved from year 1 to year 2, and now we'll have to see what happens going into even after this year, next year. Can he keep this up? Can he still play at that high level? So there you go. But now we're going to get to John Morant. John Morant is probably the closest one out of this group that probably is closest to Russell Westbrook. Explosive guy, exciting, can dunk, up and coming, plays hard every possession, tries to get better every possession, and just does what he has to do out there. And, he's a guy who you want on your team because he plays so hard. And, he has all the potential, if he improves his game, to be a good defender. To eventually, if he can get a better shot, can become a good shooter. He already has the ability to get into the paint and get to the hole with aggression. He's one of those guys who you feel like he can become the new Russell Westbrook of the NBA. Now, people may have a little saying on that, that means he's not going to become a championship player, but he's going to be a guy who will always be considered one of the best in the game. And you will always feel like that you have a chance with if he's on your team. You've seen what he's done in Memphis with his young core. There ain't no reason why you can't believe he couldn't do it in another situation or another chance if he gets another opportunity to be the guy. Obviously, this is why Memphis has embraced him so much, because of what he's brought to the table and why everybody thinks he could be really the guy for the future to come in Memphis. Next guy, Zion Williamson. Obviously, we all know about Zion. Tons and tons of college hype. He has been hyped out the gym. People think that he is going to be the new face of the league after LeBron. They think he's that big and that good. He's a guy who has the size of a LeBron James, but the explosiveness of a Derrick Rose. And that's obviously a very dangerous combination. You can see it in the way he dunks. He dunks with so much power. He can get off the ground and jump and make things happen. He has the capabilities of being one of the better defenders in the game, and has all the ability in the world. If he improves that jump shot, he could be a dangerous, honestly unstoppable. Now, he does have a bit of a set shot, though. So he doesn't have the fluid stroke. He's a set shooter, so obviously he's a little bit easier to defend a set shooter because they have to take more time to get the shot off. But if he could get a jump shot and improve his finishing in the lane, because he is someone who is used to overpowering guys. So usually when he actually has to make another move to finish, he doesn't usually have that move, but I'm sure he'll get that move. Remember, first year he'll get better. But he has all the potential in the world to be one of the best to ever play this game. Because especially with the hype that's surrounding him. So. And then, lastly, Jason Tatum. Obviously, we've seen this year with Jason Tatum the maturation. How he's improved so much. How he's hitting the surface of being a superstar. A man who can carry a team. Out of all 5 of these players, you probably would think he's the most complete one right now. Polished game, can defend, athletic. He's a guy who just has all the potential in the world to be one of the best players in the game. I feel like he could be potentially like a Kevin Durant, where he's going to be one of the best players in the game for a long time, but he may not get recognition as one of the best as the best player until he gets closer to his 30s. Because there's so many other good players that you just don't think Jason Tatum and think, wow, star. Wow, superstar. Wow, top player. You don't really think that when you think Jason Tatum. You always knew he was good, but you never really knew if you thought superstar. And right now he's hitting superstar. And that's making him one of the most impressive players that potentially is available out here in the NBA. And so with all that being said, I probably want to start a team with Jason Tatum. I just feel like he's the most complete player in this game out of all these players. Luka's defensive liability, Trey's just defensive liability because of his size, Zion and injury to concerns and durability, plus a set shot. You know, John Morant, is he going to learn how to play winning basketball and be efficient? Jason Tatum does all that already. Efficient, plays defense, can shoot, can get to the lane. He does a lot of things right. And so you have no reason to think he couldn't be the face of the league, or at least a superstar in this league for years to come. But thank you for listening to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Brice Lewis. Tune in next time. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you and have a good day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.